All right, Heart Centered Marketing. We are May 21st, 7:02. But we're here on almost on time because I will get my stuff together sooner or later. And it's only because her whole background back there totally threw me off. And I was in awe. And it's all Parmees' fault.
It is all my fault. How dare I be living in paradise?
Good to see you here, my friend. Thank you for being here again, which will promise to be another epic episode. Tell us a little bit about what's been going on with you. How are you?
I'm well. I'm well. As you can see, I'm still up in Mexico, so no envy for all the Canadians that might be watching, but yeah, it is quite beautiful up here, down here, I should say. Things have been really good. I feel like the topic that we're going to be discussing today on today's episode has been the topic of the month for me, it seems, with every single client and with looking at some of the things that are happening in the industry, looking at some shifts that are happening with personal brands and buying behavior. And I feel like this is a topic that I've gained a lot of traction in with my own clients and just with my own content. And I thought it would be important to bring it to today's discussion as well, because I think there's a lot of confusion around sales and around selling. And Joey, you and I have a very similar philosophy when it comes to sales and how we present our information, present our content, the way that we convert clients. And so I thought it would be helpful to have a discussion about what is it like to sell a solution versus an offer and the differences between that, because one is really talking about a process and a mechanism, and the other is really talking about the container and what your actual, what the offer is that you've put together. So excited to
Oh
dive in.
wow, yeah. Okay, so let's get right into it. Like I love this topic, and so
I'm
you're
down.
right. I'm glad that you kind of summed it up right at the end there, which is like, well, isn't an offer the same thing as the solution thingy? And really, it's not in most of the stuff. So I'll let you start off this conversation.
All right. So to set off the premise, I think like if anyone watching knows me or follows my content knows that I, for the better half of the last year, I would say, have been tackling this giant notion in the industry that says that you always need to be selling. And the only way for people to know who you are and that you exist, and the only way for people to understand why they should purchase from you or work with you is if you were always selling. And I think that there's nuance to this that hasn't been covered by some of the big figures in the marketing space, or there's a lot of misinformation that is being said or spread around what actual selling looks like. So I had a really interesting conversation with a client of mine last week, and she was like, I really want you to talk about how selling is not just putting links in the comments and getting people to go buy, or selling is not just directing people to the sales page where your offer is being housed. And
Right.
I think, unfortunately, a lot of people have bought into this idea that the more they show up speaking about the thing that they've put together, meaning the actual offer itself. So for you, it could be Atlas. For me, it's my program called NeuroMessage. The more we show up and talk about that, that's what's going to create buyer desire. But the
Mm-hmm.
way that I've always operated is that people aren't actually buying your offer, they're buying the approach that you're taking to solving a problem. Is
Yeah.
that something you've encountered as well?
Yeah, 100%. I'm glad you brought that up because, when I talk about this conversation comes up once in a while with me and clients where, in terms of the name of the program, and this will all tie it right back in. And I'm not saying the
Yeah.
name of the program is not important and like, get, do this to get 12 leads in a day type of thing, whatever. And I'm like, I'm gonna just side on the fact that it didn't really matter what I called it. Like I just love the fact that like Atlas is my hero and that was it. And when I'm talking about what I do and how I help people, it's like this is the outcome I'm gonna do and this is the process. And oh, by the way, it's just like this thing called Atlas. Like it and it's 12 weeks long and whatever. Like that's kind of the last thing I talk about. Like it's like this is
Yeah.
just how it's going to work. But they're
Yeah.
already pre-sold by the time they get to the page or talk to me or whatever. So I don't
Yeah.
sell Atlas. I don't sell a group
No.
coaching program. I
No.
sell so yeah, so I'm totally on board with this.
Yeah, and I think it's so interesting because as a messaging strategist, like my main thing is messaging and wording and helping you understand how to position yourself and articulate the value so that people know exactly what they're coming to you for and what they're paying you for.
Mhm.
one of the really interesting parts of that is that people will come and say, I need to get clear on my program promise. Like, what's the program name, or what's the program tagline, or what are the value statements that I can share about what my program actually does. And what they're doing when they're asking me that is that they're missing a very crucial and critical step that comes before knowing what your program promise is. And that is, what is the problem that you are solving, and what is your
Right.
unique method or approach to solving that. And you'd be shocked at how many people I speak to on a weekly basis where they've crafted amazing offers, or they've, run through a number of rounds of their program. And then when I ask them, what's the main thing that you're solving for people, they're stumped. They can't answer that question. And so this is really where I get into more, when you say that my sales are just not working, or people are just not coming to me, or I've been posting constantly, I've been doing all the things, and for some reason I just can't seem to gain any traction, or the demand from my market is just simply not there. I always take an approach of looking at the conversion issue from, are you selling your offer, or are you selling your solution? And when I present these two things and juxtapose them the way that I do, a lot of people are like, oh my goodness, I didn't even realize that those two are different things. I thought
Oh,
they were
oh
the
my
same thing.
gosh. Yeah, yeah. And recently, I was messing around with what I actually do. Like, there's a lot of things that I focus on, like getting your time back and all these other things, where when I'm having conversations with people and it's like, oh yeah, by the way, it's Atlas. And recently, because I'm always engaged in conversations, I'm always learning from answering questions one on one or in a conversation. And I always find that when I'm against the wall, like for somebody like you, it's like, so what is it? Like, what do you do? I'm like, it's just this. And then I'm like,
Yeah.
why am I not saying that? Like, what am I doing? Hey, Jane, good to see you here. Nice to see you. Thanks for being here. You know Jane, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Actually, I had dinner at her place last summer. Hey, Jane.
That's that's two things I'm envious of you now. The background and and there's going to be a laundry list, I'm sure.
Exactly.
Where was I going with this? Oh yeah, so recently I'm like, it just came to me then, what do I help people do? And I'm actually, well, okay, I am simplifying and helping heart-centered entrepreneurs or experts to stop losing money, time, and energy building products and courses that don't sell. And that's kind of what the essence of what I do. Because everybody that comes to me, unfortunately, has gone through that process of like, I've tried all these other things, it's not working for me, here's what I did, and I'm like, dang it, I wish I could get to you sooner so that you don't need me, right? But that's
Right.
not the way. So like, how do I articulate, what do I do? So is that articulate enough for, you know?
Yes. So here's what I'm going to challenge you on a little bit here, because
Okay.
I think that there's also an old paradigm and a new paradigm of what actually leads people to purchase from you. So the old paradigm is that you needed to articulate what the result or what the transformation of working with you is as clearly and as concisely as possible. That's where the idea of I help statements and program promises and program taglines really kind of gained popularity and really became important. And that's why so many people have still hyper fixated on, I need to describe what it is that I do as clearly and as concisely in a single sentence or two sentences max, in order to
Mm-hmm.
get people to see what it is that what I can help them with.
Okay.
We've talked about elevator pitches and going to networking events and being able to really clearly say what it is that you do as quickly as possible. In today's market, I would argue, and many might negate this, in today's market, that I help statement or positioning statement is not that important anymore, because people are not buying based on what that singular promise is. They're buying based on the entire ecosystem of the context they have of who is Joey. What does he believe in? What does he consistently talk about? So one of the ideas that I'm always drilling into my clients is that your message or the promise of the transformation that you're providing is not just a single sentence. Because
Right.
if that was the case, I could also say, like, I help you clarify your message so you get leads coming to you consistently, something like that, right? But there's so many different results that people get while working with me.
Right.
I could also say that they unlock a plethora of content ideas. They get
Right.
super clear on who their ideal client is. They get really clear on what their program or their process is. There's so many like micro outcomes that they take away from working together. And so when you say that people come to your world and they're already sold on Atlas, it's not because they're sold on the promise or that single sentence that you just said. They come to you because they're sold on the entire idea or the context that you've provided throughout the various pieces of information or things that you talk about even in your content or on this show that had created this like micro aha. It's like getting them to the, oh, boom, oh yeah, that I never thought about like that. And it's the consistency of you showing up with repeated exposure to this message that has built this ecosystem of who is Joey, what is Atlas, what is he all about, how is he relevant to me, and that's what gets them sold into what it is that you do. They're not buying your promise, they're buying your approach and who you are behind the scenes of how you help them get to that promise.
Okay, like so, yeah. There's 1,000% agree. So like, and you're absolutely right. I hope everybody listening to this. By the way, if you're live, hit hashtag live or hashtag replay if you're watching the replay. But just go back and listen to that last 5 minutes because that was like 10 years of schooling of marketing and how to build your business inside of like 5 minutes. Okay, so let me ask you this, and you're right. It's not that I want to go out into the world with a T-shirt that says, "Hey, this is what I'm doing." But so, how do you approach that? So, for somebody listening to this, and even I'm going to get a huge education out of this, is how do you start off a conversation? Like, how do you, what do you put on your LinkedIn profile? Like, how do you start something like that? Because don't you have to have some kind of indicator to say,
for sure.
Oh, okay, so what would you say to that? Like, how do you approach that?
Okay, great question. So there's like everything, there isn't a one size fits all approach. So
Right.
the idea I'm going against is that you need to have an I help statement that says, I help X individuals achieve X result in X amount of time.
Right.
Or kind of templated ways that we go about writing bios or what we put in our LinkedIn or how we introduce ourselves at events. The idea that I have is that this is context specific, and it's very important to know who you're interacting with and what is the context of the situation before you can actually craft that message. So the way that I train my clients is that they have different ways of explaining what it is that they do, depending on where they're at, who they're speaking to.
Okay.
So if this is a bio, for example, let's say if it's your Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, like whatever the little section is that just describes, like gives a quick little snapshot.
Yeah, you got like 150 characters and that's it. Like,
Right. So the way that I approach it is two ways. So you either want to talk about the context of the problem that you solve, or you want to focus on the title that is something that people are already looking for. So if you were to look at my bio, whether it's on Facebook or Instagram, I think I have it as like the brains behind the brands that you buy, because my entire thing is, at the psychology of branding, the psychology of positioning, the psychology of what makes people to get, makes them want to buy from you. So I have like a little snapshot of that, so that kind of gives them a little bit of a taste of who I am. And then I go into my title, which is a messaging, positioning, and sales strategist for personal brands and creatives. So I'm kind of approaching it from the perspective of, here's what I have to offer you, right? And I name who it is that I work with, so personal brands and creatives. Some people might have coaches and consultants, others have, whatever it is that the context of who they're speaking to, and then I've got my solution. Or the other camp that you might fall in is that you focus on the problem that you solve. So a client of mine is a therapist that transitioned into more of like a coaching space, and she focuses on healing, perfectionism, and people pleasing. So that's like really her domain of expertise. So she's focused, and on her bios, it's like, the expert that you go to heal your people pleasing and your perfectionism. So the positioning is now tackling the problem. So do you see how those two things are very context specific?
Yeah. So like, if I just took out the beginning of mine and without the I help, it's like, could it be like the expert who helps, or no, the expert who, well, what would you say? Like, because the really what I am doing is helping people get their lives back. Like they're stopping money being drained from them, money, energy, and time, all that's it's just they're drained when they come to me. And so I stop that process.
Yeah.
And or prevent it, but most of the times I'm stopping the process. It's kind of like plugging a leaky bucket and then giving them their life back so they can, have their freedom, have a calm life, like all these things. Like, how would you put that in a very short, little succinct bio that's not the I help?
Okay, fantastic question. So what you just described...
And I'm going to be writing this down because I'm getting free advice right here.
Of course. I'm like, this needs to be transcribed at some point. So what you just described is what I call a byproduct transformation. So by getting their lives back, that is what you as the professional knows people are going to take away while working with you. But that is not what people initially come to you to solve,
That's right. That's right.
right? So for the purpose of a bio, and especially because the marketplace has become so saturated nowadays with, everyone that has something to offer you, or everyone has something to sell you, especially when it comes to marketing, what you want to become known for is what is the approach that you take or what is the problem that you solve. So them getting their lives back is a byproduct. That's something that I
That's the
would say
result.
that's the result. That's kind of like something I would put at the end of a so that you can get your life back. So it's
Right.
the end of the promise, right? But it's not the main reason why people hire you.
So I think it's like I help or I do this thing for these people. I simplify and unfunnel. So that's part of it because unfunnel is huge.
Yes.
So, and then I simplify and unfunnel so that I forget how it's penned now because it's really recently to me it's recent for me. So
Yeah.
that experts or whatever stop losing money, time, and energy building products that don't sell. Like that's basically what it is.
That basically can be it. Something else that just came to me as you were talking, you could say something like heart-led marketing for the experts looking to unfunnel and like break through the industry noise to create products that help them get their time and money and energy back, like something like that.
I
Obviously, that's a
think
bit messy, but
Yeah, I think I like the I like if you want to call it the negative spin, like the
yeah,
stop losing the money piece is kind of a pattern interrupt because everybody's like, hey, I'm going to help you build this thing to make a whole bunch of money and have an epic life, and I'm like the other way. I'm going no, and I'll tell you why. This came to me because when I was in the real estate space industry and I was helping real estate investors, get people to give the money to buy properties. Okay. And the way that I used to do it was very simple because they all had the elevator pitches and I help this and I help that. And I'm like, you know what I do? When people say to me, what do you do? I say, I help people stop losing money. That was it. I still had to help and I stopped. And they're like, what are you talking about? And I go, that's exactly my point. If you're interested in how do I stop people from losing money, then what I'll say is, well, those guys who, when you get your mutual funds in and you open up your mutual funds and they're not doing well and you're freaking out, you're not making any money. Well, I stopped that process. And they're like, holy crap. So the reason I'm saying this is because I knew that in order for me to ask you for $100,000 to invest and you're losing money over here and you're freaking out at your financials, you're not worried about giving me $100,000. Or even if you said, oh, I'm interested in real estate investing, right? But I still got all this debt over here. So let me talk to you later. So I attacked the problem that was really happening. And so that got me a whole bunch of joint venture partners because they're like, oh, so how do you stop this mutual fund things? And I would give them a solution. Well, set up a self-directed RRSPs, blah, blah, blah. And then you can use that money to actually invest in real estate. And all of a sudden they were, guess what? Interested in now talking to me about what I truly wanted to sell them.
yeah.
So that's why I like that other approach. And it kind of came to me, I'm like,
Yep.
why am I not doing this for the online space? Does that give you more
Exactly.
context?
Yeah, totally. So you would fall into the second camp of what I described when I said that there's two different ways to create like bios. So there's like you lead with your title or your solution, or you lead with the problem that you're tackling. So you're leading with the problem that you're tackling. So stop
Yes.
losing money. Yeah.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Cool. So I'm on the right track. I just got to try to. Believe me, I did try to take out the I help thing. Like I tried, and I'm still working on it. Like I guide this, or I do this, or like. So yeah, I'm
And here's
with
the
you
thing,
because
you can keep it. No, like you can keep it. It's not that I have anything against I help statements. It's just the pressure to feeling like you need to fit what it is that you do in an I help statement
in
in
a
order
one
to be
statement
successful.
thingy, and that's it. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
sometimes hard to do. I can technically also say like I help creatives and personal brands develop a brand presence or develop content, develop messaging that allows them to stand out and consistently attract right fit clients. Like I can have my own version of an I help statement, but what that does is that it fits me into a box along with everybody else who can make that same promise. And my entire argument against that type of thinking is that your positioning is not just a single sentence. Your positioning is how you consistently show up with relevant messages to build the case and demonstrate your expertise for how you create that solution. Because one of the other big things that I talk about, sorry, go ahead. I know you have a thought to share.
No, I was just going to add to it because I'm writing this down as you're talking, and I'm thinking of like, okay, and again, we're just brainstorming here, by the way. So it's like, so what do you do? And I could say something to the effect of, well, heart-centered experts or heart-centered creators come to me because they want to stop losing money building products and services that don't work so they can get their life back or something like that.
Something like that. Yep.
Okay, cool. I just want everybody to hear what we're talking about here. And by the way, if you want a little bit of help in your statement, let's take advantage of Parmees while she's here because she charges like $15,000 a minute. So put it into your put it into the comments. I can't see the ones in the Facebook group, by the way. If you're in the Facebook group and you're commenting, I apologize. I just can't see those ones because I haven't got the software figured out to bring them into Ecamm. There you go. So sorry to cut you off. Continue, Parmees.
Okay, this is great. It's like kind of like a live, like we get to see how the thought process breaks down. And I typically say to clients too, like your I help statement is not something that we can refine on a single session. There are times where we come up with bits and pieces of it, and then you're out in a walk, you're in a shower, and then all of a sudden it comes to you where you're like, oh, bam, that's exactly what I'm trying to say. So allow it to evolve and develop as you go. But what I was going to say is that there's also this other thing that comes into play when it comes to your positioning, and especially when it comes to selling your offer versus your solution. That becomes really, really important. So many of us have been taught that we attract our clients or people come to us because of the end result that we provide, right? And even the last time you and I had a talk on here, we talked about how people don't just come to you for what you do, they come to you for how you solve it and who you are behind the brand. And we talked about authenticity and all of that. Now, yes. I'm going to take it one step further or one step deeper. So the idea that people just come to you for what you do has been a bit more debunked, or I should say has evolved, because the market has become more sophisticated and it has become more saturated with people who can all make the same promises.
Yes.
So it's not just based on the end results that people now look at you and say, oh, like, Joey will help me unfunnel my business, or, oh, Parmees will help me write really polarizing content. They're not coming to us for that. They're coming to us and more specifically wanting to pay to work with us when they agree with our method of getting there. And so it becomes increasingly important for you to be able to infuse bits and pieces of your process and bits and pieces of how you create the results in the content, because that's what positions you, not the end outcome, right? And we even touched on this a little bit last time where we talked about how you and I can promise the same outcome, technically, right? You have it from the unfunneling perspective. I have it more from like the messaging ecosystem perspective. But at the end of the day, anyone who comes to us is looking for a way to stand out online, cut through all the marketing BS, simplify their business, create this connection-based business. That's what we both do. That's what we're both about. Our philosophies align, and the result that we provide aligns. But the methods and processes that you and I have developed are very different. And even if we look back at some of the discussions that you and I have had, Joey, we'll look at and we'll see, you'll be like, oh, I teach that too, but I call it the XYZ.
That's right.
Or, oh, I do something similar, but I call it the blah, blah, blah. And then I'll be like, oh, yeah, I do the same thing, but also like I have this extra step to it. So that's what makes us different. And people will come to us based on whichever approach they resonate with most.
Would you also say, I'm going to add to this, would you also, this is my belief, that they also come to us for character? Like all of that stuff is important, but it's character. It's not like they don't like me, but they're like attracted to you because like I really like the way her vibe is, her character. And that is, I think, a huge thing that a lot of people are missing out is that human element. Is that going out into the world and saying, this is who Parmees is, this is who Joey is, this is the way I am, and repelling the people that just don't agree with our character, moral values, those kind of things. We're not trying to be jackasses about it, but it's like, this is it. And then, what do you think of that? I already know what the answer is.
No. This is really good. I'm so glad you said this because I feel like this has again been another reoccurring theme for many of my clients, and it's been something that has been a point of resistance. Where I call this your peripheral message, and I don't remember if we talked about this the last.
I don't think so. I love that though. I'm going to steal it. I'm going to TM it.
Don't you dare.
Um,
There's a process, and it might go beyond the scope of today's call, but maybe at some other point we can discuss this. There's a process where I break down the three different types of messages we need to have, and we need to consistently reinforce with our presence so that the right people come to us. Because it's one thing to generate leads, it's a whole other thing to generate qualified leads. So
yeah.
you have your core message, which is like what you solve. You have your adjacent message, which is like your unique approach. And what you just talked about is the peripheral message. Now, this
Wow.
is the one where it comes down to, like you said, it comes down to how you align with certain people. And it has nothing to do with whether they think Joey is better than Parmees or Parmees is better than Joey. It's whose energy and whose way of being do I align with the most. So
Yes.
in your peripheral message, I talk a lot about how the bits and pieces of what you show about your day life and what you believe in, and like I'm living out in Mexico, and I live a very like a specific type of lifestyle. I have a specific routine, and I show a lot of that in my content. Not because I'm trying to be an influencer and trying to be like, look at me, I'm so amazing, but it's just because it's a part of who I am. And so you might have bits and pieces of who you are that comes out in the way that you speak, the way that you address, the way that you just all of it. And someone might be more attracted to that. I just had a friend stay with me, and she's in the process of building her own brand as well. And she talks a lot about being very faith-based and being, she's very connected with her creator, and she's got certain rituals. And I'm like, that's great. And that's something you want to bring into your content, because I'm sure there are people in your audience that would resonate that you are very faith-based, and that's a really big part of your day-to-day. For me, that isn't a very big part of my day-to-day. So somebody who doesn't resonate with that might resonate more with me. And again, there's nothing to say that either or is right or wrong. It's just simply who are you aligning yourself more with.
This is
Very
huge
similar
because.
to, yeah.
Oh no, go ahead. Go ahead. Finish.
No. I was going to say, just as a little controversial thing I'm going to throw in there. I don't know if you saw the post I made about how I didn't work with the coach because they were polyamorous. Did
Oh,
you
I
see
did
that?
not see that one. No.
Yeah. So I recommend, I'm not going to get into it now, but I'm gonna recommend maybe take a look at that. And because the whole point of the post wasn't anything against polyamory, it was because I was talking about how we make decisions to work with people who align with our values. And
Yes.
it was to say that I disagree with that lifestyle or that lifestyle is wrong. The nuance here was simply saying I did not want to be mentored by someone who is going to be leading me when they themselves lead themselves in that way.
Got
So
it.
that's another, yeah, it was a spicy
Yeah, see,
one.
we're getting into like I actually had an hour-long conversation before this one with a client, and we were talking about what I call the superpower matrix, and I might have mentioned it a few times here,
Yeah.
where it's basically the four quadrants of, your skill set, your unique abilities, the stuff that is, natural to you, what you're passionate about, what your personality is all about, your character. It also has the quadrant of this is my life experience, which I call life tuition that nobody else has. So,
Love that.
and then you also have the frameworks and the stuff that you have, like the stuff that your IPs, and you combine all of that. Now it's a unique person that nobody else is going to be able to copy. And I'm not saying use them all at once, but that's where
Yeah.
I go to and like, what am I going to talk about today? And so, to your point, with the character and vibing with people and all these things, that's the way. That's why you do it, because I want to work with people that don't drain my batteries, even if I don't completely 100% do the things that they do. They don't have to be mirror images of me, but I share a lot of who I am, even my character, my flaws, if you want to call it that. Like, I like to learn in public
Yeah.
a lot. I throw things at the
Yeah.
wall. I'm like, here's what I'm thinking. And by the way, if you're a linear person who can't handle any of this stuff and you need it all, like, I'm probably not the guy for you, because I'm not. Like, that would
Yeah.
totally freak out somebody who's like, I cannot handle that, man. You got to have everything in play. And if it's not set in stone like that, you can't move things around. So yes, I
Yeah.
get it. I work with a lot of linear people who are like, I can handle Joey. Like, sometimes he's frustrating, but I get it. Why? Because I've shown to the world this is who I am and this is how I think. So they looked at me, I thinking and saying, I could probably work with that. But it's also
Yeah.
repelled other people say, whoa, he needs to
Yeah.
get his stuff together before I even work with this dude, because he's all over the map, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that doesn't scare me. It's like, I'd rather have that, because what's going to happen is I'm going to have a very frustrating relationship with that person. They're not a bad human, nothing like that. It's just
Right.
going to be a lot of tension between us, just based on that
That's it.
one character trait of what I do and how I operate.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things I even mentioned in that Polly post was that I don't necessarily agree with the idea that the way you do something is the way you do everything.
Yeah.
I think there's also nuance to that as well. But with that being said, that there's an invisible layer of mentorship that many people don't talk about, meaning when you invest with someone or when you're working with someone, there's the way that they approach or the energy that they bring to that container. Aside from just their methods and their processes and their frameworks, it's who they are as a person that you need to agree with. And so if
100%.
you are that kind of like engineer type of person who requires the step-by-step framework and blueprint, and that's what you need, then yeah, same with me. Working with me is not going to be an ideal fit because I use a lot of the Socratic method of like asking questions and going deep and going off script. And if that's that's too much for your brain to handle, yeah, we're not a good fit to work together. So very similar
Right.
to you. There's aspects of my personality and my character that might not vibe well with your learning style and with your style of wanting to show up for yourself. And again, it doesn't make either of us wrong for it. It just means
Right.
certain people are more of a right fit than others are.
Yeah, and it's one of the reasons. By the way, I wanted to say hi to Collie. Thanks for being here live, and Christopher's here. Thank you for being here live. Great to see you guys. Anybody else that I can't see on the comments, but let us know with a hashtag live if you're here live or hashtag replay, because I know that a lot of people watch the replay afterwards. And so Chris says nonlinear mind mapping where everything is interconnected. Yeah, it starts out with that. Like my brain starts out with the big idea of like, here's what I want to accomplish, and then I just start putting things together, and eventually it gets down to this is kind of a system, if you want to call it that. And one of the reasons I go out into the public to tell stories about this is how my brain works is because, again, I don't want to change who I am in order just to get money or to make the offer or make the sale or anything like that. I've tried that one too. Like that's probably not me. I don't want that. And it's so much easier because people make the decisions, and we can get into this other discussion too, whether it's today or another day, about the customer journey, because the customer journey happens well beyond what we can see first. Like we don't know who's watching us wherever they watch us. The only time we can start tracking it is, okay, they came to my Facebook group, or they're on my Facebook page now, or they opted into my thingy. And everybody thinks that, oh, I can track all this customer journey. I'm like, no, you can't. It's like this whole thing that's out there that you have no idea what's happening. And the only way for people to understand what you're doing is to do what we're saying here, is to just go out into the world, say who you are, talk about your processes and all these things, and they will eventually find you to get into your trackable ecosystem. Do you agree?
Yes, I agree. And it's so funny because my background is conversion optimization. And I've talked about this on your show before, where like my background was, heavy duty copywriting, conversion, looking at funnels, looking at like all the steps, and customer journey mapping and kind of the buyer psychology behind that was a huge part of what I taught. And it was a huge part of my entire offer and what I was known for. And now thinking back at it, I realized that it was such a linear, mechanical, and naive way to think that I had all the data points to know exactly, which messages were being consumed at what pace, and if this person opens this email, it means they saw this. And now I realize all of that, pardon my French, bullshit.
Yeah.
It's like the amount of people who've come into my DMs who have asked for links to purchase things or want to get on a one-on-one call. I've never seen them in my engagement. They have never opened an email. They have never, you don't know, like you said, you don't know what they're consuming, what they're looking at. And so I get it. Like as a business, you need to know your numbers. You need to have a rough idea of like where your leads are coming from. And like, yeah, of course, you don't want to just be going at it at random.
Yeah.
However, your job is not to be tracking those metrics. Your job is to be getting really clear on what it is that you do, what it is that you solve, mastering that craft and making sure that you're consistently evolving and iterating your processes to be even more well crafted to the market needs, and then just getting really good at communicating it and being consistent with communicating it. So that's it. That's honestly it. That is your job, is to do your job well and to talk about it often.
Okay, I'm gonna come back. I'm gonna come back to your question, Chris, because I want to just jump on that for a second. This is hilarious to me. Not what you said, but it's hilarious the fact that you're doing your job well when you're doing exactly what you said, because then you get people, trolls, haters, whatever, who will say, "Why do you keep talking about the same thing? Like, just talk about something different." And you're like, you're making my point. Like exactly. I know my stuff so well. This is the thing that I stand for. This is what I'm all about. This is what I serve, who I serve. And somebody who's a troll or against you or a hater on the other side is like, you don't talk about anything else. Thank you for proving my point. What do you think about that?
Exactly. That's how brand associations are created. And of course, there's multiple in the way that I work with my clients too. Like I teach them multiple different angles of how they can talk about the same problem or the same thing from multiple different ways. But at the end of it, the bulk of what you speak about always ties back to a core idea or a thesis statement that
Yeah.
you're reinforcing. Like there's something that you take a stand on, and everything that you put out there is simply just a reinforcing argument to reinforce the thing that you do. And that's usually the thing that you solve for people. That's what people
Yeah.
come to you for.
Yeah.
So
And
that's
you
the
know,
point.
yeah, and that's the point. So like I remember, you know, in with coaches and mentors, and they were also they were talking about haters or whatever, trollers, and they're like, when you've made it when this starts to happen, when people start to push against you. I'm like, really? Wow, like okay. And then finally it happened to me, and I know exactly what they're talking about. I'm like, now I know what you're talking about, that level of success that you can call it like, oh, okay. Because not only do you get that, which is not a very much, but it's just that happens. But then I notice that there's the other side. There's advocates for you. There's people who can relay your message in their own words differently that they've been understanding and saying, and you're like, well, look at that and say, wow, I never knew Parmees totally like understood it that way. I had that before where somebody said, call Joey or reach out to Joey, but just to let you know, he doesn't do funnels. He's all about unfunneling. Like they basically said everything I'm doing, like, and they're like a walking billboard for me. I'm like, this
That's
is
it. And
brilliant.
that's where exactly that's where you start creating brand awareness around not just like, oh, Joey's brand like Atlas. And coming back full circle to what we're talking about today, where it's like they're not linking you to Atlas.
Not at
They're
all.
linking you to how you do things. When they say, by the way, Joey doesn't do funnels. By the way, Joey takes XYZ approach. That's when you know that they're clear on your solution and not your offer. That's the whole
Yes.
point. Because if you came out and you consistently talked about how amazing Atlas is, which is what I see a lot of people doing, and that's what they attribute to sales. They see it as, oh, I'm going to talk about my offer. I'm going to talk about, how many people are in it right now. Every time they enroll a
Yeah.
new client, like, congrats to Parmees for enrolling into her second round of Atlas, whatever.
Yeah.
They'll post like Parmees made 5,000 in her first 2 weeks of Atlas, and it's like it's always just like talking about Atlas with zero context. And
Yeah.
it's a very lazy way of selling because no one actually understands, aside from the big flashy wins and the kind of self-glorifying language that you're using about your program, why it's relevant to them, what is it solving, where is it going to get them that they're unable to reach on their own. But when people come to you because they say, hey, Joey's got this really authentic way of connecting and building connections and understanding like how to talk about your offer. And by the way, he doesn't do any of that complex like funneling stuff because I know you probably don't want to do any of that. That's when you know that you have these walking, talking billboards that understand the core of your message and have become advocates for your solution.
I've
You don't
got
need to sell your,
goosebumps.
yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Exactly. And I never knew that until, and everybody listening to this, because I know that a lot of people have a trouble with, I need to stick with one message or one core, I guess one core thing. Like what's the one thing, and tie everything back into that. And they're so afraid of that. And because first of all, they don't see the ROI of it right away. And it's
Yeah.
taken years, and I'm sure you know this. I don't have to tell you this, but it's taken years for me to actually get that level of like, I know what Joey does. And by the way, this is a recent thing that I'm thinking about right now, where that person is not even a client. Like it's not a client saying this; it's another person who just knows me in my tribe, but still like they're not a client. And that even freaked me out more. So when a client does it, fantastic. It's kind of a referral. They've got a little bit of behind the scenes, but this was not, which is what I really want to stress for anybody listening to this. So
Yeah.
that was super, super important to understand. And I was going to go somewhere else, but I want to, it'll come back to me, but we'll go back to Chris to answer his questions because he got two of them here. So the first one is, does business unfold when it's ready, or do I unfold business when I'm ready?
Ooh. So your business can only unfold as deep as you have unfolded yourself.
Wow. Wow, that's deep. Do you want to go into that one?
I can go into that one. Yeah. Your business is not you. However, it is an extension of you. So I don't agree that, you are the business, because I think there is a degree of separation. And I think that your brand as well is not, your brand is not you, but it is an extension of you. And you can only go as far, or your business can only go as far as you have met yourself. Just as I tell my
Oh,
clients, like,
wow.
you can only guide clients as far as you personally have gone yourself. So if a client is facing some form of resistance that you yourself have not encountered yet, it becomes very difficult for you to be able to guide them in an authentic, experience grounded way. You'll be probably be looking at externalizing certain solutions, or looking at fixing or solving their problem, but it's not coming from a place of embodied wisdom. It's coming from what you know. It's coming from the head, not from the gut and the heart. So to answer your question, Chris, does business unfold when it's ready, or do I unfold? It is a consistent and perpetual process of unfolding, meaning the unfolding never stops. The
Right.
unfolding is not something that you get to the point where it's like, it has unfolded and now I am ready. It is ready. I have completed this journey. Like, it doesn't, that
It's so
doesn't
true.
happen. It consistently unfolds. You will get to a point where you feel like, I really got my shit together now. Like, you kind of have a clear idea of what is your ideal client, who are the people that you really want to serve, who is a not good fit for your uh, whatever it is that you offer. You might also get really clear on what that one core thing is. You might get clear on the different messages, but even that is going to evolve. I'm kind of going into my 10th year of business right now, and I feel like I've really solidified what it is that I do, and I've really become grounded and convicted in my expertise, but there's still modifications and unfolding and deepening of my wisdom and experience that is happening. But my business was not able to unfold faster than my own personal unfolding. So
100%,
that
because that's where you get the book experts, right? Because anybody can pick up any book and read a few of them and be an expert and say, I'm going to teach this thing. And well, I guess we could argue that, yeah, you might be able to teach it, but did you experience it? Did you go through it? Do you know the nuances of it? All that stuff. And I'm
yeah.
100% with you. And when I'm even teaching Atlas, it's all about that. Like I say to them, we're looking for discoveries of like what people are really solve problems that they can solve, but they have already had to reach the oasis. I call it the oasis, the outcome, whatever you want to call it, because we know what it's like to be there. We have experienced it, and we can paint the picture of the future, but
Yes.
they don't have any idea what it feels like. And that's a big difference, because we could still paint, if we really want to argue this as a copywriter or something, that we've read a book and we can kind of paint the picture of a free life or whatever the thing is, because we're good at writing
Yeah.
copy. But if we haven't
No.
experienced it, it's a completely different thing. Like, I know what it's like to have, 96% of my time back. I take in, 3 days, I work 3 days, like all that. I know what it's like. And when you throw things at me, I can come back and you can't stump me. Like, it's almost impossible to stump me with what I
Same.
teach, right? Same as
Yeah.
you, right? It's like,
Yeah.
don't worry, we got this. And that's a completely different thing when you have the experience to guide. And that's
Mm,
huge, because people are coming to us for guidance based on our experience and expertise and our
yes.
knowledge.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that is huge for me.
Yeah. And I'll even add to that as well. I feel that we've talked about how, the energy behind your content transmits more than just, the words itself. I
Hmm.
also believe that as a guide, as a coach, as a mentor, as a consultant, like as someone that other people have invested into, that conviction in having reached that result before being able to promise it in others is what also pulls people to you and compels them to want to do the work to get the results. Because when I was teaching from a standpoint of, I know this is what converts, or like, this is what my conversion strategy has taught me, but I hadn't created those results myself. Again, I was guiding people based on externalized principles and externalized
Right.
theories and externalized things like that I teach. And I'm like, hey, if you follow the pastor framework, this is really going to work for you, because us and 1,500 other copywriters use this framework, and I know it's going to work. But until I was able to actually embody those results myself, everyone comes to me because they want to have a solid brand presence. They want to have people who consistently come into their DMs inquiring to work with them without them needing to pitch themselves. And I'm a living embodiment that is possible. I never pitch my offers. I never do launches. I never sell the way that traditionally we've been taught to sell. And
Right,
yet my
right.
programs are always filled, and like my schedule is always booked. So how is it that I'm able to do that? But it's only because I have actually reached that result and have created consistent leads and income following my own principles and strategies that I can now guide other people to do the same. And when they're kind of in a place of like, I don't know if I can do this, I don't know if I'm doing it right, I don't shake, I don't wobble, because I'm like, this is just
Exactly.
part of the process. Like, this is part of the process. You're gonna have doubts. I was there too, but guess what? I made it, and I can guide you through it too.
Yeah, because we can. Yeah, it's really about being there. Because I want to come back to this. Hopefully, I won't forget. Because I want to open up another can of worms here on that program thing. But I want to get to Chris because he asked another question. I think it's
Yeah.
related. I don't want to get lose context here.
Yeah.
Can
So
you read that?
Parmees spoke about a friend who intertwined one spirituality into their brand. From your opinion, do you think people are looking for a perspective into spirituality and business as a motivator into brand awareness? So the people who, I'm gonna reframe my answer to this to answer your question, but also give a little bit more perspective as to like what I was talking about. It is not necessarily that we want to target the people who are looking for a deeper perspective or intertwining of spirituality and business. It's you being like, I'm a spiritual person. I'm going to intertwine that in my brand. And whoever that attracts and whoever resonates with that is the right fit person. And whoever is repelled by that is not the right fit person. So it's not taking it in an external lens and looking at, okay, what is it that people are looking for so I can feed them? It's more, what is it that I want to become known for and how that's going to attract people to me. So
Right.
hopefully that kind of answers that question.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more because it's again it's those positions or like what do I stand for? What is the stake in the ground that I want to put into play that I need to tell the world because if this is what I truly believe, like for me it's like I love animals. So if you don't like animals and you're kicking animals all over the place and you don't care, that's not a good fit. And
Yeah.
even if that's not where a conversation that happens, but it just happens that it for some reason comes up in a conversation in one of my coaching calls, I'm like, that's going to totally throw me off. It's going to really break that bond with someone. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I used to kick
Yeah.
animals all over the place. Like, that would not be a good thing, right? So that's what I'm saying. It's not that we talk about this all the time. It's just that if it came up, I'm like, whoa, right? So another thing, my friend example is, I'm not a very political person at all, like at
Yeah.
all, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, it's you want to be if you follow all this kind of stuff, fantastic. I'm not going to judge you or like there shouldn't be a judgment, but like live your life, but don't bring it into me. Don't bring it into my world. And just because I don't follow it, like if that conversation kind of, just if it envelopes into something different, and like this is just not, if that's what you're all about, like so
Right.
we can have differences is what I'm saying. Like
Yes.
you do this, you do that. That's kind of cool. You like a red car, I like a blue car. We're totally cool. We still like a car, and we're still we use a car to go buy groceries, right? Great. High five.
Yeah.
Does it like so? You like a BMW, I like a Mercedes, or whatever, vice versa. So we're not judging each other on that. But if it gets to that level, right? It's like no. If you don't like Mercedes, forget it. Like you're an idiot. That's kind of a. So this is I know I'm the most stupid examples ever, right?
No, it's not. Really.
Right,
It's not.
but-
So funny little side note. I Audi, and I have a thing against BMW drivers. I'm not even joking. And at one point, as like a funny thing, was like, if you're a BMW driver, we're not going to get along as clients.
Uh-oh.
Like, we're
Uh-oh. I have
So,
like a
yeah.
2006 BMW sitting in my drive.
Oh no!
Uh-oh.
Oh no!
But I'm not one. I don't know what the BMW driver is, but so there we go. We're never going to see Parmees again. This is her farewell tour here on the Heart Center Marketing Show.
All jokes aside, though, I know exactly what you're saying. There's certain things where it's like it doesn't really matter, right? Like
Yeah.
whatever. It's just we have our differences. But once it's infused in your values, so let's say going back to Chris, like your spirituality question, if spirituality is a major part of how you lead your decisions and how
Right
you
on.
guide and you create, like where it stems from, then if someone is like completely atheist and you're talking about like faith and you're talking about, certain things that like fuel your message, that's not going to vibe with them at all. right? That's not going to create, and again, it's not that they're against your way of doing it, but if their approach and their way of thinking is not in alignment with how you think and how you create, that's going to create a mismatch in values. So yeah, that's all that
Yeah, it's
is.
so true. Like, and I want to give another like real world example of this for anybody listening, because, as I said, I'll use the political thing again because that was a big one for me. So I'm not political and I don't really follow news or anything like that. And I remember I had this one client who was a really really good friend, and we would spend at least 10 minutes of every single call because that person was right into everything, like right into like what's going on in the world and everything else. And like, so what do you think about that? What do you think about this? I'm like, it has nothing to do with today's call. Like, I get it. I understand this kind of stuff, that let's focus on this. And I would avoid talking about this stuff. And they would say like, so you just don't care about it? I'm like, it's not like I don't care, but I can't do anything about it. And then we would get into all kinds of things about voting, about all kinds of stuff. I'm like, this is stressing me out. So every single call would be like 10 minutes, 15 minutes of almost an argument of like, why don't you do that? Why don't you watch this? Or why don't you do, I'm like,
Nope.
can we just get on to the thing? So I had to fire the person. And that's what I'm talking about. The person is a great, great human being. Don't have anything against the person. But in that situation, that context, it was stressing me out. They're like, oh no, now I got to get into this. And I know it's going to be about the Canada pipeline, or it's going to be about like, oh my God, I don't need to get into this. Right. So that's a situation where that didn't align. And it was a stressor because that's the way they think.
Yes.
And they just couldn't let it go. I'm like, man. So is that what we're talking about? Does that? Yeah.
And I think it also plays into like when you're talking about your offer versus your solution, it comes back down to when you're talking about your solution. And again, just to clarify, your solution is the mechanism that you've developed to facilitate the results. So it could be the pathway, it could be the frameworks you've put together, it could be like the specific tool that you use for, like, for example, someone can say like, I help you live your best life, and they use talk therapy versus somebody else uses like somatic nervous system techniques. So
Right.
that's like
Okay.
tool that you use. So when we're talking about your solution, one of the other things that comes into play is the positioning in how you're positioning yourself as relevant to your ideal client. And there's there's more ways, but there's two ways I'll bring to today's call. One is looking at, oh, I just lost my train of thought. It was so good. Hold on a second. What?
But I'm not ignoring you. But I'm writing some stuff down because you're brainstorming here. Wow.
Oh, I know. Okay, so what were we talking about? We're talking about your solution. So you know how I said there's like multiple different ways, and I'm just going to bring two? My brain went into like the 17 different ways, and then just forgot the two that I was going to talk about. So
I'm glad I'm not the only one who loses the train of thought.
No. I do too. So there's multiple ways that you want to be talking about your offer, or your solution. So the first thing that you want to consider is, what is it that people are looking to actually resolve, right? So when we're looking at the I can help you live your best life ever, and the person is using somatic nervous system stuff versus the person using just like talk therapy, or it could be like cognitive behavioral therapy, let's say. So two very different systems. They can be connected, but those are the two ways that you're solving the problem. The first is what we're talking about right now, Joey, with like the whole political thing, is like infusing bits and pieces of your values and infusing bits and pieces of your way of thinking about the problem. That is important.
Yes.
So that's like a layer. So we want to make sure that people are clear what is the actual problem that is being solved at the core, and what is your perspective on that. So let's say if you're not living your best life right now, whatever that means, right? Some people might say, well, it's because your thoughts are not doing you, you haven't developed healthy thinking patterns. And that's why I use cognitive behavioral therapy, because I have my experience that people need to change the way that they think and their behavior in order to live their best life. Someone else might say, no, actually, it's not just your thoughts and your behaviors. There's a deeper embodiment that needs to happen. There's a deeper somatic practice that needs to happen. And if your body is consistently in fight or flight, or if you're constantly in a freeze phase, what's going to happen is you're going to work on your thoughts, but that's not going to do anything. So do you see how they're both leading to the same result of living your best life, living more, living with more pleasure, joy, abundance, whatever, but the approach that they're taking is different. So
Yes. Okay.
yeah, go for
So
it.
you hit on what the chain of beliefs, and we've talked about this before,
Yeah, yeah.
where it is like, okay, what's your solution? So it's a bar stool moment where you meet the person, like and they got the problem, and then two different people are going to have a different thing. So for me, it would be like, well, I'm just not making money selling my courses or something, my products, or whatever. And I'm like, well, tell me what's going on. And they could say anything they want. My Facebook ad sucks. I need help on my sales page. Doesn't matter what they say. I'm basically going to say, well, that's because you don't know who your dream client is. Like, it's all going to go down to that. And they're going to like, oh, yes, I do. And I go, tell me about your dream client. And then they'll tell me an avatar. And I go, that's an avatar. That's not a dream client.
Yeah.
So that will either
Yeah.
stop them in their tracks to say, you're full of it. What the hell are you talking about? It's the same thing. Or it opens up like, what do you mean? And that opens up
Yeah.
my philosophy, my thinking, right? And then moves them along the path of the chain of beliefs. Someone else may say the completely different thing. My stuff's not
Yes.
selling, da da da. And then they get here and they go, well, that's because you probably don't know how to write copy this the right way, like whatever it
Yeah.
is, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's the point. It's like, that's why I'm so big on the chain of beliefs when I'm teaching that in Atlas, by the way. Hashtag Atlas, come to we're opening next week. No, just kidding. Yeah, so I teach that because I ignored it for many, many years. And I'm like, how can I get into the world to say what I need them to say? So they're already basically pre-sold by the time they say, well, what is Atlas? Or can I get in? Can I talk a little bit more about that, right? They've already been pre-sold on all of the ideas and methodologies that I'm already thinking, because if they don't, there's no reason for me to sell Atlas. And then when I'm even selling or explaining the chain of beliefs to clients, I'm like, imagine this. Imagine if you met somebody at the bar and they said, I've got this problem. And you're like, that's fantastic. Actually, why don't we go out to the parking lot? Because I've got I got this product that I have, and I can give you a discount on it because, well, we're actually in the same bar today, and like all the whole hunky dunky stuff. You wouldn't do that. You would actually have a conversation with them. It's like, what's going on? This kind of thing. So that's where the mindset is. But you're
Yes.
right. Like, you have to have that approach and be willing to stand out to. That's your differentiator. That's what I call it. That's the differentiator. And then there's an epiphany moment where it's like, oh, I've never heard that before. Like my unfunnel. That's a differentiator. And it's like, what do you mean by unfunnel? Everything's a funnel. Yeah, but it means this. Oh, and then they get this epiphany moment and they're like, I kind of like that. Or you're
Yeah.
full of it. I'm going to go have another beer over there. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And I love that you named it as an epiphany moment, because that is like really the aha. Like there's again, this is another example of us using different language to describe the same thing. It's like creating that micro aha moment through your content where people go, oh, that's what
100%.
I need, right? And
100%.
the second layer, like the second part of this that kind of goes in hand with the epiphany, which was the second thing I was going to talk about,
Sorry to
is
cut you off.
yeah, no, it's all good. It's finding the, like, I call it the power to blame. Other people call it something else, but it's like finding the common enemy
The
of
common
what
enemy.
has stopped them, right? So it's what has stopped them from reaching whatever it is that they're trying to reach right now. And the common enemy, or what I call like the power to blame, is a really, really important one for two reasons. One, it removes the guilt and shame from them being like, oh, I should have had this figured out by now. Why haven't I been able to make progress? And two, the moment you call out something that you're against, that means you're taking a stand for something. That is leading them down to what you would maybe call the chain of beliefs of creating more evidence for why your pathway or your mechanism is superior or better or better fit, like whatever that, whatever it is that you're trying to sell them on. But it's not the offer, meaning you're not selling them on Atlas. You're
No.
selling them on the mechanism on which Atlas is built on or built from.
100%. You couldn't have said it any better. That's exactly it. That's why I use unfunnel.
Exactly. The whole unfunneling process is because the common enemy that you've identified is all the bells and whistles that people think they need to have in order to funnel people into their business. And
Right.
it's like, well, let's unfunnel all of that. So you're taking a stand against that common enemy of like, you need to have funnels, you need to have all these fancy things in order to get people on there. That's how you position yourself. That is basically your positioning. It's like, in order to get whatever result, I need to do this and no longer do this. That's
right.
statement.
Exactly. So like for me, because I know that people want their life back and they want all this freedom and all this kind of stuff. And so I take positions of, well, instead of waiting for something to happen or waiting for freedom because you built all these funnels, why don't we unfunnel it and get freedom right now and make money at
Yeah.
the same time kind of thing. Right. So I'm very well aware of like what I'm positioning against and
Yeah.
saying like, look, you want a calm life. You don't want to overwhelm. You don't want to be in tech and all this kind of stuff. Let's unfunnel this. And that's what they're like, wow, what does this all mean? So you get the right people who are attracted to what you're saying. This is an amazing conversation. There's more comments here, and then we'll get back to this because I wrote something down while we were brainstorming, and I want to run it by you too. Because
Please.
thank you so much for this. Because I don't know about anybody else, but I am totally taking advantage of this. I've got my iPad. I don't know if you can see it. Like
By all
full,
means.
like
Oh,
so.
look at
I'm not.
you. Wow.
I'm not fooling around when I say I'm taking notes. Okay,
Yeah.
so Christopher says repelling anti-avatars just by being one's most authentic self.
Bingo. Yeah.
Yep,
Yep.
that's what it is. And then Collie's here, and she says there is a saying: you attract what you are, and you is your values, beliefs. And if for some reason someone comes into our life and they do not align, then we are at choice to choose to not engage or take things to another step, which, as you say, Joey, drains your battery. And 100% agree. Love and soul, hugs, Collie.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Any input on that?
Yeah,
Parmees?
it's kind of like I think about like romantic relationships. Like if you were to go on a date and you would, you know, research the person to see what are they into and they're like, "Oh, okay, like he's into dogs, so let me write that down and I'm going to pretend like I'm into dogs." And what does he do? "Oh, he volunteers at the shelter. Okay, I'm going to write that down." And then you show up and you talk about dogs and how about you like volunteer at the shelter. It's like it's the same in your marketing when you feel like, oh, like people need to hear certain things in order to buy into us. And it's like, no, like Collie said, it's like people are attracted to you based on who you actually are. So the more you fully embody yourself, even in a romantic situation or a dating situation, it's like the person is attracted to you because you're not trying to mold yourself into someone you're not. It's
I
the
love that.
seductive, right? It's the seductiveness of you just fully owning who you are and being like, you know what? If you don't agree with it, then we're just not a match. Just
Right.
like how if I hate dogs and I hate that you volunteer at the shelter, I'm not going to make you wrong for it. I'm just going to be like, oh, this is not my person because I don't like dogs for whatever
That's
reason.
right.
Which is not true. I do like dogs, but just
Yeah,
bad
yeah.
example. But you know, yeah,
We've got a lot of touchy examples in this conversation.
yeah, we do. There's a lot. There's a lot of spiciness here.
That's a better word for it, spiciness. Okay, I'll let you read this one.
All right, so does one have to have the chain available and connected to help them move forward through the process to the oasis? I seem to know the client, but my pathway is broken. Does this matter, or will dream clients seek me out even if the pathway is broken in the chain? I have things to say, but Joey, do you have? I feel like
Yeah,
you have
well,
things
so,
to say.
Chris is part of my tribe, so he's using the language of Atlas and the chain of beliefs and
Yeah,
stuff, but I'm sure you can still converse in
yeah,
this.
yeah,
The chain of beliefs, Chris, is a difficult process. It's not something that comes to you immediately, and especially the differentiator and even the epiphany sometimes. The epiphany, I'm getting really good at helping people understand that, but when I teach it and like, okay, I don't know what the differentiator is. Like, I don't know what that is. The most important piece of the chain is what Parmees has been talking about all of this this session is who is the person and what do you solve for them? What is the thing, the problem that you're solving, and then what is the end result of it? And if you and the end result of the chain is the easiest part because that's like I'm going to buy Atlas or I'm going to buy the program, but there's a piece before that they need to believe. You probably know what that is too. Those are the two easiest. The beginning point is not easy, but it's easier than finding out, well, what differentiates me? What's my epiphany statement or the epiphany thing for me? I don't know what that is. So in essence, it is kind of broken or it's built along the way. In my case, it's always about the conversations. And here's how I established my chain of beliefs. It was within one-on-one conversations multiple times. And I found myself repeating myself again and again and again. And they were saying, oh, that's what you mean by a dream client. And then I'm looking at my chain of beliefs going, wait a second, like that's what differentiates me because every argument or debate or objection was about, no, Parmees, that's an avatar. I get that. That's not what I'm talking about. Here's what I'm talking about. And then they would say, oh, right. So for anybody listening, including you, Chris, it's all about in the conversations where you find yourself repeatedly explaining things or saying, no, 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 that's not what I'm talking about. And that becomes, how can I craft this into an area of the chain or my messaging or what I'm talking about out there that sets me apart from everybody else? Any input
Yeah.
on that, Parmees?
Yeah, I love that you just said that. So the initial thing that popped into my head is that, Chris, the pathway is not broken. It's just unclear. It's
Yes.
not broken. There's just missing information that will be uncovered the more you work with people. And I say this
Yes.
all the time. Oh, you've probably heard me say this too, where it's like your message and your process uncover or unveil themselves the more you engage with it. So the
Yes.
systems and concepts that I've created didn't just, eureka moment fall into my lap one day. They happened after I was answering questions to people's, or sorry, yeah, giving answers to people's questions that made me consistently say the same thing over and over again. And I'm like, this is a system. This is a concept. Like I can make a diagram out of this. I can make something out of this because I kept saying the same thing over and over again. Or you'll be prompted with a question, and all of a sudden you'll have a moment where you're like, oh, that's what they're missing, and then
Right.
that becomes a
Right.
part of your chain. So it's not that the chain is broken, it's just that there's certain parts of it that are unclear. And the way that you want to clarify it is to consistently engage with the people who have that problem or who want to get to the oasis and see what are the roadblocks, what are the questions that come up for them, what are the things that they come to you wanting to resolve. And the more you engage and the more you solve, the more you catch yourself putting together the links that feel like are not there right now.
Right on, right on. And you're like, I mean, you're a copywriter, so you would understand, and I'm sure everybody else will too. It's kind of like the chain of beliefs is this objection handling before the objection happens. Like that's what it
Yeah.
is. Like when you write
Yes.
a sales letter and you're answering objections, well, the chain of beliefs is like take the three or four objections that are in one category and talk about that. I'll give you an example of this. Collie will come
Yeah.
right back to you. One might say, okay, I got you, Joey, dream clients, and they got to be your friends and stuff, and they got to be like, blah, blah, blah. That's fantastic, but I don't have a big following on social media. I'm like, you don't need a big social media following. You don't need a big email list. You don't need, like, so that's another objection that comes into play. So I don't even I say, and by the way, you do this because they're friends and you don't want to have a big following. You don't want thousands and thousands of people. So that makes it a whole lot easier to not have a big list. So I'm hitting the objection before it even
Yeah.
happens. Like, what?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I got you. Right. So that's, you have to, the more, and so it's the more of the conversation, like you said, Parmees, is like when you're hearing people ask the same question or push back on, yeah, but, and you're hearing that
Yeah.
over and over and over again, then that's, at least for me, part of the chain that has to go
Exactly.
out there to talk about.
Exactly. And I love that you said you're addressing the objections before they even happen, because a huge part of building the case and a huge part of building a presence, which is kind of like the third part of what I do with my clients, is like how do you build a presence that captures attention but also cultivates demand? Because it's one thing to get a lot of attention, right? It's one thing to get a lot of engagement and
Yeah.
people engage in stuff. It's a whole other to actually get people reaching out being like, how do we work together? And a big part of that is exactly what you said, is being able to answer the questions that people have in their heads before they even bring it to you. That's what really gets them to be like, oh, this person knows their stuff.
I want to bring up something else that you brought up
Like,
quite a few times, I think, in your posts, which is that
yeah,
you need to be able to back it up. Like you can't
yeah,
just
yeah,
say something like, oh, you can just simplify and have a Google Doc and that's it. You need to also back that up. Like, what do you mean by unfunnel? Well, you don't need the sales page. Just do a Google Doc and that's it because you've heard it or whatever. No, you need to be able to back up that claim, right?
yes,
It's not just
yup,
something to
and
like shock the market.
no, and going back to my polyamory post, I'm writing a follow up to that. And here's why. Here's why I'm writing the follow up to it. That post had over 100 comments, and not a single person disagreed with me. And I had a client voice message me over the weekend being like, how is it that you made a post that was that polarizing and that controversial, and yet nobody hated on you? Like, how do you do that? And
Wow.
the whole purpose behind that post was, yes, to talk about, the values and making sure that we're in alignment, but it was also to demonstrate that if you can craft a solid argument, even if it's really out there, and I had some poly people who actually commented and they agreed with me. If you're able to craft a solid argument, you basically become inarguable. Like you've created a point where people say, yeah, she's got a point, or yeah, he's got a point, or like, oh, I can see it from that perspective. That's the art of communication. And like, yes, that's my copywriting background coming in, but it's from a perspective of, like you said, you need to be able to back it up. So if you say you don't need all the fancy bells and whistles and you don't need a funnel, do you have the evidence, and can you
Right.
demonstrate your expertise to show why people don't need a funnel? And then
Right.
all of your content now is focused on building the case for why you don't need a funnel.
Right.
That's the art of communication and building demand in a way that, people can't argue with.
Yep. Yeah, and it's also perspectives too. Like, by the way, thank you, Collie. This I know she's gold, right? It's like, it's amazing. I got all this stuff here. Oh, so let me go back to this, and then I'll come back to another thing here. Is so as you were thinking or talking about this, I was just again here's another statement idea. So here's what I wrote down. So by simplifying and unfunneling, I help creatives stop losing time, money, and energy building products that don't sell. Different than starting out with I help creatives. It's more like by doing this thing, which is what you talked about, right? This is the method. Here's what it helps you do. Like maybe I could spin around and or I stop creatives from losing money or something like that, right?
Yeah, it could even start with like using the unfunneling method.
Yeah.
To help creatives, blah 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 blah.
Yeah, using unfunneling. Simplifying unfunneling.
Yeah.
Cool. I like that. Okay. And where was I going to go with? See, I where I was going to go with
both of our brains.
Oh my gosh. But you know what? I mean, this has been so epic because I love this. We could talk for so many hours. I just can't wait to get you back because I know that there's going to be another topic, a hot topic that we can even like jump off of this one or a brand new one.
There's like two things that I feel like would be really important. Can I go for it, or do you have something that you want to?
No, go for it.
No? This just popped into my head. So when we were talking about, you said your superhero, is it called Matrix?
Oh, superpower matrix. Yes.
Your superpower. Okay, so your superpower matrix. So I'm assuming, based on how you quickly described it, that is kind of like how brands develop an identity, or like that's how you help them. Like,
yeah, it's a brand persona identity. Your authenticity, yes.
Okay, great. So I have a pillar in my program that talks about building your brand identity, and the mechanism that I use behind it is what I call the influence triad. So this is just an example for people listening of like talking about what a process and a mechanism is. So Joey's matrix and my triad are the mechanism that we use to get people results. So you had, what were the 4 things that you had?
So there's your unique gifts, right? Your unique things that you do. There's your passion, your personality, your character. Like who are you as a person? And then there's your expertise. Your expertise, your life tuition, the experiences that you've had, like stories. And it doesn't have to be all about business, but I flew through a plate glass window and survived, and I can tie that into marketing and everything else, right? And then there's your process on the bottom right, which is the hardest one for people. Like, I don't have a process. Yes. Well, you will get a process, which is your triad, and then even when I'm teaching the superpower matrix, I'm like, I'm teaching you the superpower matrix, and it's meta. Like, this is the process that I'm teaching you that goes into that quadrant that I'm actually teaching in the world. So that's what it is. It's the processes.
Okay. So that process and what you just came up with, I'm assuming came out from the multitude of experiences that you had working with clients and looking at like what are the different things that they need to have in place in order to stand out, in order to have a cohesive message, all of that. So I uncovered the same thing with my own clients, except I call it the influence triad, and it has to do with what is your cause. So what is the thing that you're fighting against and fighting for? And then it comes down to you. So that's the second part of the triad. So you encompasses your values, your beliefs, your stories. What is the core thing that you're solving for people? Like that might be like the expertise or the life tuition is what you call it. So coming down to that. And then I've also have your unique process of being able to get people to the result.
Right. So that's the process piece of mine. So we have the same thing. You're just lumping in the you part, and I've separated them out. Like, so I got beliefs, values, moral, like all that stuff in the passion part. Like, what are you passionate about? What are you standing for? What hill are you going to die on? Who are you as a person? Like, go out and say to the world, like, I just don't deal with numbers very well. Like be okay with that, that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And then your unique abilities, which is like, well, I'm ADD, and that's a huge unique ability. I mean, and these other things. So you're really focusing on what are the things that I do that comes so naturally to me that I'm not really seeing that is a superpower, and I
Yeah.
really get them to dive deep into that because I go, you overlook a lot of your superpowers, which
Yeah,
is,
you do.
in my opinion, which is the easiest thing for us to get clients in, because now if I'm only concentrating on the stuff that I do really, really well, that I think like, why would anybody pay me for this? Because it's so dang
Okay.
easy.
Yeah.
Once I'm there, and then you align all of those other three components for my pieces and yours as well, is like all of this encompasses and brings in that dream client. Oh my God, it's a match made in heaven. And I have something called the dream client trifecta, which is,
Yeah.
who is the person, what is the thing that you do really, 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 really well, and are they looking for that solution? Do they have very small solutions, or they don't have a lot of solutions or things that they can go to? Are they actively looking for that? Like, it's this triad. Like, get all these three things together, you're gold. You're gold. So you and I, we have a lot of the same stuff. We just
Yeah.
call it different things,
Different
right?
stuff, yeah. That's crazy because when it comes to the ideal client stuff, I actually have the matrix. So it's like flipped. It's like you have the matrix when it comes to their brand, I have the triad, and then I've got the niching matrix, and you have, yeah. So
The dream
I'm
client
using this as,
trifecta.
yeah. So I'm using this as an example for everyone listening as well to see that like processes come to be from experience. And even though we have very similar processes, we also have our different ways of teaching them, and we have different approaches to it. So this is the gold that you want to infuse into your content that gets people sold on why they need it. So Joey, you can have a case, or sorry, you can have a post that builds the case for why people need to have access to this matrix to really understand how to
Mm-hmm.
show up in today's marketplace. And then your entire, let's say an angle that you take with your marketing becomes getting people sold on why this matrix is the missing piece to helping them understand how to position themselves more differently. I can create the same thing, but for my triad. So it simply becomes the case of being able to infuse your expertise and your processes and your unique mechanism into your content so that people can see why is it that the thing that you do differs than if they were to go work with XYZ type person.
And
And
so,
that's important. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm glad you brought this up because we don't have the time to get into it now. But I think that brings up another. There's two things that brings up. One is like, how do we actually create frameworks? And I'd love to have a conversation about that. Like, how does it evolve? How does it get there? Is there a method
Yeah.
and a procedure? And I'll touch on a little bit about that and how at least they come to me, and then we'll leave it for another conversation. But the other thing is what you just said about, well, you can take this process that you have or this framework and then infuse it into your marketing. Then you get the conversations about, well, how much should I be showing? Like, how much should I be teaching out there in the world before, like, I'm giving away too much? That's a huge question. But to me, it's like, this is what you are known for. This is what positions you. And it's kind of like, I forget who told me this, or I read it in a book that says basically, just put a simple little thing out like a lead magnet, and just get people on your list and get them into your world. And if it doesn't matter what it is. So in other words, it could be crap and doesn't matter. Well, they're judging you on that crap. So if you're putting out your framework and your intellectual property and saying, this is how I think, and this is what I think the missing piece is,
Yeah.
and that's gold, or at least shifts their mind perspective a little bit, they're judging you on that to say, Parmees really knows her stuff. That's completely different. So it's not like you're going, well, they know the triad now, so they're not going to buy from me. And if you got that mindset, that's a whole other. Okay, I'll
Oh, yeah,
I'll shut up.
well, here's
Go
the
ahead.
thing. No, it's okay. Never. Please don't ever shut up. No. You can give them, I can give them the triad, that you can give them the matrix, but what they're investing into is my feedback on it and the help and implement.
Right.
So like they
Right.
can know all the things and have no clue how to actually put it into use, or no clue. It's like, okay, great. Now I have all my different elements of my triad. How do I put this in my marketing? How do I build
Right.
content from this? How do I build an offer from this? They're not paying for access to our intellectual property. The intellectual property to me is the key to get them in. It's more the
Yes.
implementation of that. Like, I really do believe, and I do think we should have another separate conversation on building frameworks, but in today's marketplace, in 2024 and beyond, if you do not have intellectual property, it is going to be very hard for you to stand out. If you don't have unique processes and mechanisms and frameworks that you've developed to help facilitate a result, it will be very, very difficult for you to create like no trust, like, oh yeah, that's the go-to person for that. And it doesn't have to be fancy frameworks. It could be concepts like unfunneling. It could be like things that you become known for. You need to have brand associations with like you, Joey, and the thing that you do for people and how you do it. That's going to become really important.
I think, yeah, the framework piece of it, is going to be a really good conversation just for anybody listening, because I had trouble with frameworks before, and people, colleagues would say, you have a lot of stuff up there in your head as knowledge, but you're missing a framework. I'll never forget those words. And many, many people used to tell me that. And it was not very long ago, maybe 6 years ago. Like, Joey, you're smart. You got this, you got the knowledge, but you're missing frameworks. I'm like, how do you build frameworks? So I think this is going to be a good conversation for that. And for me, the process was learning. It all comes really back to me. I'll just leave this as an open loop for everybody, and maybe you can just comment on this too. It was about, again, in the conversations, it was again about me explaining something. Like, for example, go back to superpower matrix. They'll say, like, Joey, how do you, like, I don't understand how to stand out. I'm like, I don't know. I kind of just tell stories about myself. Like, I'm kind of listening, like I'm zooming out and watching myself and talk, and I'm kind of like catching on, like, And then they were like, yeah, I'm not really afraid to go out into the world and say that I don't know how to do math in my head. I'm not afraid of saying that, and that's who I am, or that I got a temper sometimes, or whatever. Like, whatever. I'm just telling people who I am, right? And they're like, wow. I go, so that allowed me to say, wait a minute, there's these 4 components that I'm doing that, hey, why don't I just make a little matrix thing and just call it, right? And that was it. Like, it was like...
Yeah, you're reverse engineering what's working. It's like, what did I do to create that result? Well, I've been doing this consistently, and I've been doing that. Like, the three core messages that I came up with that I shared a little bit earlier on this call, like there's the core, the adjacent, the peripheral.
I love those.
I taught that to someone yesterday, and they were like, where did you learn that? I'm like, I didn't learn it. I came up with it. Because the whole reason why my brand took off was because I didn't just talk about what I solved. I also talked about my approaches, and I also talked a lot about my personal beliefs and lifestyle. So I chunked those tidbits into 3 core things, and I've got a whole training around that. And I have this, I'm just going to show it as a teaser. I have an entire, like, this is just me drawing and doodling as I'm talking to clients, but like, this is what I do. Like, we whip up frameworks to organize their information, because what frameworks do is that it takes very abstract, broad concepts and it gives them form, it gives them shape, and it helps people understand, oh, there's steps to this, or there's different principles I need to apply. So it really helps with the facilitation of a transformation. So,
and you know what? One more thing before you go, because I love what you're doing there. And the fact is that, again, another teaser for the framework piece is that if you have 1 or 2 frameworks, like, you could actually, that's it. Like, you could just have those and teach right from that. You don't have to have all kinds of slides and everything else. Just walk up and write your framework out and teach from that. You could easily do a 30-minute thing on a framework.
Absolutely.
It's
absolutely.
like,
I don't have slides. I don't have slides in my program. I'm in the process of like reworking some of the back end stuff, and I get against all the rules when it comes to like learning design and all of that, but it's basically like me just speaking and then taking out a flip chart, taking out a whiteboard on Zoom, or taking out one of these and just drawing it out as I go.
I love that.
That's what people remember. They remember these things. So yeah, that's that. When we talk about unique mechanisms and getting people sold on your solution, not your offer, your solutions is the way that you organize the material, the way that you guide people through the steps or the principles. And it doesn't have to be linear all the time either. But it's this that you want to build like, know, and trust for, not just the offer. The offer only happens in the DMs. When people come into my world and they're like, okay, I love everything about you and how you speak and how you what you stand for and problems that you call out. What does it look like for us to work together? They don't even know what my offers are.
Exactly. And they're pre-sold.
Yes, they're pre-sold. They're ready. They're just like, give me the details. I don't care what it is. I need to know. They don't need to know how many calls are involved. They don't need to know how long. They don't like, Well, I'll give them that information just because I should, but they don't need to know that. They come
Yeah,
to
they're
me
not.
because they
Well, it's not that they don't need to know. It's that not basing their decision on that
exactly,
information. Like it's
exactly,
still like,
yeah,
okay, when is this going to happen? Blah blah blah. But they've already been pre-sold. They're like, I'm in. Just tell me when this is going to
yep,
happen. And how does this all work, right? So that's what we're saying, and I'm glad that you brought that up. Parmees,
yeah.
it's always a pleasure. You are amazing. I got so much value out of this conversation. Thank you for schooling this through me. I mean, I'm just going to keep reworking this message. I really
Of course.
appreciate you. Is there anything that you want to just say before we end tonight?
Just yeah, one last thing. Don't feel pressure to consistently be showing up and selling in the traditional ways that you're being told. One of the things that I became known for was really adopting a contrarian approach to how marketing and sales has always been taught in the online space. And I received a lot of backlash from many years for, not selling. And people would tell me, oh, she's probably not confident in what she has to offer. She probably doesn't know what she's talking about because she never makes offers. And now so many more people are coming around to being like, I really enjoy and appreciate the way that you sell. I don't feel like you're arm twisting me. I don't feel like when I come into your DMs, you're trying to close the sale. I
Yes,
can
yes.
tell, right? I can tell that you're just having a genuine conversation to see if this leads to something and if it doesn't. And that detached energy is what really gets people through the door. So don't feel the pressure to see people as dollar signs or to convert or to close, because that's the metric of business success. I really see it as when people are sold on you and when they're sold on your solution, the offer sale just almost becomes a natural byproduct. So
Exactly. It's that you don't even have to sell. It's like sell without selling. Like it's so
that
easy
is it.
to just do it,
That is it.
right? Thank you, Kali. By the way, thank you for the nice words, kind words. Thank you for everybody watching live on the replay. Appreciate you. I'm sorry I didn't see anything in the Facebook group. I'm sure there's messages
Well,
there. But really appreciate you. We will be back with Parmees for another episode. Maybe we'll talk that when we'll be about frameworks. So, but it'll be something epic like this. Thank you, Parmees. Have yourself an
thank
amazing, amazing night, everyone. We'll see you next week.
you.